real Aerith, Genova Aerith, Ghost Aerith? How many Aeriths are there? What the heck is going on at the end of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth? We're going to take a look at some other theories out there that have been floated around to me, because I now find myself firmly planted in between two separate theories that I think could both be happening at the same time. It's pretty interesting, so we're going to take a look at that in today's video and a few other things from the community. So if any of that sounds cool to you, you can click the like button, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments down below. So we start off today's community comments video with Mind X Funeral, or Mind Cross Funeral. I feel like there's a few different ways you can say that. They're talking about chickens. They go on to say, I was thinking about the chocobos in part 3, and I came up with an idea I'm obsessed with now. I want to revisit all the regions we explored in Rebirth aboard the Highwind, obviously piloted by Cid in the Midgar 7th, except now the world is in chaos due to Meteor and the war with Wutai. We've got to find and rescue all of the named chocobos we befriended in Rebirth and store them aboard the Highwind in the Chocobo Stable Bay. I think this could potentially happen. Now, first off, the Midgar 7th, they were such a cool group of dudes, and they're a really great point in Rebirth, again, that really expands upon the whole idea that not everyone at Shinra is a bad person or a D-bag. These were guys who were ride or die with Cloud to the very end, and then once they have to separate, it's actually kind of a sad moment because Cloud gets to be this really cool leader. He's got these great soldiers behind him, and they trust him. And then Cloud gets to see them again later in the game in one of the last side quests where you head back to Junon and you get to reunite with those guys. I think they will bring those guys back in part 3. It's just, how do they do it? They could be the group of men manning the sub if we have to go back into the ocean and do the whole submarine fight and minigame. They could potentially show up there and then maybe join us on the Highwind, or maybe they just straight up go to the Highwind, become our crew along with Cid. Those guys were great, so I think we will see them again. As far as the chickens, I actually really do like this idea, and it kind of feeds maybe into how they could handle something like chocobo breeding. So with the world being in chaos, we then go to all of these old locations and we have to rescue these chocobos, maybe from monsters or weird kind of situations that they're in. Maybe they're trapped. And since every chicken was different and had a different ability, that kind of lends itself to the chocobo breeding mechanic of, okay, you need this specific chocobo that's this color and this sex in order to mate with this chocobo. So I suppose they could just simplify the whole thing by having us rescue the birds that we had in Rebirth, and then those become the ones we work with. Although we could save them, put them on the Highwind, but then we're still required to find the wild chocobos out there that we then take to the chocobo farm with Chocobo Billy, and those are the ones we have to breed. There's a number of ways they can do it, but it would be nice to see these chickens return, especially the one we got in Nibelheim. I think it was Selena was the name. Best chicken in all of Rebirth. Up next, we have more talk about merging of the worlds, and did Aerith actually die? Did Cloud deflect Sephiroth? And this comes to us from, I hope I pronounced this right, Gio James. They go on to say, Cloud deflected Sephiroth's sword and saved Aerith, but because of the merging of worlds, that is not the outcome that we get to move forward with. That's what's happening at the end of Rebirth. That's why Cloud can see an alive version of Aerith while no one else can, and why he can see a rift in the sky. It's deliberately ambiguous, but the fact that it is deliberately ambiguous is in itself very telling of what actually happened. Think about it. If Cloud hadn't managed to deflect Sephiroth's sword, then they would have just showed her unambiguously dying, like the story that we already know. Personally, I think they're writing themselves into a corner. I hope they can stick the landing with part 3, but I'm doubtful. While I do agree I hope they can stick the landing in part 3, I tend to lean more towards the positive because, again, I really do enjoy the story work in 7 Remake and Rebirth and how they're handling things and fleshing things out. I like that it makes me ask questions, and it is very meta in how they tell the story, which, you know, not everyone's a big fan of meta storytelling, but I think it's pretty cool. Now, as far as them not showing Aerith's death, I think they do that because they're deliberately saving it for part 3. Because the whole ending of Rebirth is confusing, and it's supposed to be confusing. That's what the developers have said, which some people might read as a cop-out. Like, oh, it's bad writing, they don't know what they're doing, so they just want people to make content and just kind of guess at what's happening, even though they don't even know what's happening. But again, this is a story being told to us through Cloud's eyes. So we're not always going to get proper information or see things that we should see that can help us fill in the gaps of what's happening in the story, because Cloud's not well. And we will touch a lot more on that towards the end of the video. But again, I think they're saving Aerith's actual death for part 3 in that moment where Cloud becomes Cloud. And it'll be a bittersweet moment because now he's got all of his memories back, but he's also going to have to come face to face with that trauma of losing Aerith. And we will see that entire scenario play out from start to finish. Aerith being stabbed, Cloud holding her, his speech. Maybe we'll get like a quick cutscene of the Genova battle in the stuff with Sephiroth where Aerith is helping him fight. And then we will see Cloud grab Aerith's body and lay her to rest in the water. And that's going to be part of Cloud as a character coming to terms with loss and realizing that, yeah, he couldn't save her, but that's not on him. It's not his fault. So I think that's why they don't just outright show the death. They're waiting for part 3. And if handled properly, it could be a massive gut punch that just makes you cry for at least 30 to 40 minutes while you try to recover from being verklempt.
There, I'm verklempt again. All right, that's all the time we have.
Up next, we have DJ Chamber, who is talking about Genesis, the man with the red hair who loves Loveless. They go on to say, great video, Mr. Corduroy. Never been called Mr. Corduroy before, but that's kind of cool. I'm curious what you think Genesis will do if he appears in part 3. With Genesis, there's a few things you can do. You could, again, and we've talked about this in previous videos, if you open up Rebirth with a young Sephiroth story, he doesn't even have to be a teenager, honestly. He can be adult Sephiroth on a mission, and he's got Angeal and Genesis with him. You can open up the game with that stuff and have it act as a tutorial to teach the player, okay, this is how you use 3 characters, but it could also be a really cool way to introduce tri-techs. So in Rebirth, we had the synergy abilities with 2 characters. Now, what if they upgrade that and we're using 3 characters? Having those 3 characters be the demo, essentially the tutorial on how to use all that stuff, I think could work out. And it'd be a really great way to fill the player in on what happened with a younger Sephiroth, what he's been through, what Angeal and Genesis mean to him. Or you could kind of go the route they did with 7 Remake and integrate with Weiss, where they just make him a VR battle and not have him be super consequential to the overall story, which might be the right route to take. Genesis, again, is a bit of a hard pill to swallow, but again, I do want to see him return because I do like the writing in the Remake trilogy so far, and I really do kind of want to see a, not necessarily redeemed Genesis, but a better written Genesis that is performed a little better, because everything I feel is better in the Remake trilogy. So if you can, bring him back, maybe kind of, I guess, redeem the character, maybe that is the proper word, and just make him a little bit more of an appealing character, a little bit deeper, and just overall better written. Maybe you could do that. Maybe, again, we've talked about this previously, what if Genesis pops up with the weapons? He's one of the defense mechanisms of the planet, but then you'd have to get Minerva involved, and I don't know if they want to touch on all of that stuff from the compilation. I kind of like the way they're doing it now, where they just kind of pick certain things from the compilation and place it into the Remake trilogy in a way that works. Up next, we have some talk about the Forgotten Capital and how it sucked that we did not get to explore it to its fullest. This comes to us from Polo DH Tip, who says, I was disappointed that the Forgotten Capital was scrapped in the game, turned into rubles, I think maybe they meant rubble, right away. It is an iconic location along with the original tune. They sacrificed it for big spectacle.
The radicals.
Nah. Spectacles.
Testicles. Probably not.
Have no fear, because I'm pretty sure we will go back to that area in Remake Part 3, because if we go back to what happened in the original game, we do return to the Forgotten Capital. With Bugenhagen, we have to find the key, if I remember correctly, so I think we will revisit that area, especially the area leading up to it, which is the Sleeping Forest. And we do get, a little bit of the Sleeping Forest in the end of Rebirth, where there's the section where Cloud is fighting the Whispers before he comes across Aerith, and then there's the actual further part of the forest where the party is walking through, all kind of having different conversations with Cloud until they eventually meet up with Vincent, which I'm excited to revisit. That small little section we get to walk through, I think looks incredible. I think the lighting actually looks really, really good in that area. The music is super moody. Just the environment itself really reminds me of how it looked in the original game, so I'm super excited to go back there. We will go back there. It might just look a little different because some stuff again was turned to rubble when Sephiroth showed up, and that might just make a new pathway that we can then go through. Up next, we have a different idea of how you can open up Part 3. This comes to us from, please let me pronounce this properly, Redis Quitst. I believe is the name, they go on to say, start part 3 with the prologue of Vincent and Cid during the Forgotten Capital run. They go to the upper levels to find a way to get to Aerith, then they find themselves on an upper level, they see Sephiroth descend, then it cuts to their facial reaction. They get the real view of what really happened, but before we see it, it cuts to opening credits. Honestly, that could be a cool way to open up the game as well, and again, it also acts as a tutorial because now Cid and Vincent are in the party, they're brand new characters, we're gonna have to learn how to play as them, so maybe you could find a way to incorporate Cid and Vincent there, although it is kind of tricky because again, we mentioned this in the video where we talked about some of the scrapped ideas that they didn't use in Rebirth and how initially they were gonna have Cid and Vincent in that final battle against Sephiroth, and that is a little tricky to kind of implement this idea because we see Vincent with the party as they go into the capital, but then he disappears. We don't know where he's at. Cid's also not with them. So maybe it is a situation where they all head in together and then Vincent decides to stay back to do something. Cid then shows up and they go off on their own corner and we learn how to play as them and then we see like the outcome of what happened. Up next, we have the idea that I threw around in an older video talking about what if we go to the northern crater, Cloud becomes a puppet, hands over the black materia to Sephiroth, and then we have to fight him. What if we got a Cloud boss fight? So this is brought to us by Azaran Fish. I hope I got that right. My suspicion is at some point in the northern crater, whatever is left of Roche will show up and allow Cloud to pass alone. Roche will hold off the rest of the party and transform into Genova Death. Meanwhile, Cloud will head deeper into the rest of the crater and prepare to hand over the black materia to Sephiroth. Here, you will play as Reno and Rude and have to fight Cloud. Reno and Rude lose, Rufus tries to intervene but is stopped by either Song or Heidegger, and Cloud hands over the black materia. This is cool. My idea was our own party would have to fight Cloud, knock his ass out, and then, get him to Mideel. But this could be pretty cool too. I don't know if they would do it because you'd have to create now a moveset for Reno and Rude, which they do have already. We've seen the AI use it in Rebirth as we fight against them and fight alongside them, so maybe it's not too tricky to create that moveset and have them be playable, but that would be cool to finally actually get to play as Reno and Rude in particular, and not only that, but you're now fighting Cloud, so you've reversed the situation. Instead of it being Cloud in the party fighting the Turks, it's now the opposite, which could be kind of cool. Could also be kind of scary because now you've got this potentially prime mode Dark Knight Cloud who is unhinged fighting against Reno and Rude, and not just fighting to stop them, but fighting them in a way where he's gonna kill them. That could be an interesting story point. Instead of it being the party, it's the Turks fighting Cloud. This next one talks a little bit more about how Vincent could play in part 3, and this comes to us from Jeff the Reaper. Now the comment is really long, so I can't fit it all in the video, unfortunately, but the gist of it would be that Vincent, as he's on the field, of course, would use his gun, he would do some punches and kicks if he gets close to the enemy, but he would have all of the abilities that belong to his different transformations that he could use as his regular self. And I think I even brought this up in an older video where you could have like Vincent's right arm turn into like a chainsaw or a claw, and he could use that specific ability. However, the abilities would be weaker in Vincent's normal form, but you would at least have access to all of them. However, Jeff is proposing the idea that Vincent, when using his limit break, would then transform into one of the respective forms, like the Galleon Beast, the Death Gigas, Chaos, so on and so forth. And when he transforms into those forms, he loses the abilities of the other forms, but his respective abilities for that form, i.e. let's say like Galleon Beast, become much stronger. So that's a pretty cool way to balance Vincent. Human form, he gets everything, but if you want the strongest possible version of an attack, you would have to use your limit break to transform into one of those transformations. You then only get access to a few moves, but they're really powerful. And then his transformation would probably be like a summon where he's on the field for a brief amount of time, and then he reverts back to his normal self. That is a super cool idea. That could be how they actually handle Vincent, and it does make sense, allowing Vincent to use those abilities, but if you want the better ones, you gotta transform. This next one is from Ecto Gamut, and they're talking about the scene with Zack and Marlene, and how I probably might have missed this, which is cool, I miss a ton. I'm a little slow at times, but they're talking about how potentially when Zack tells Cloud save her, it's not just as simple as how I made it out to be. So they go on to say, there's no chance the developers decided to have Zack say save her for such a pointless anticlimactic reason as him simply being unaware when it's already after the audience knows what happened. It's definitely foreshadowing part 3. Also, what Marlene says to Zack is foreshadowing part 3. It's not foreshadowing the end of Rebirth. Look at where the camera points immediately after she says this, at the ribbon. The same ribbon Zack has on his hand as he's directly following Marlene's directions. You have to make Cloud better by seeking out Hojo at the Shinra building. Of all the multiple versions of Zack, only one Zack has the ribbon on his hand, and the camera keeps zooming in on it. Come on, please don't yell at me. I am but one man. I make mistakes, and I try my best. No, you're just joking. No, this is, I feel like I don't really need to add much to this. This is pretty well defined of how it is foreshadowing part 3, and potentially Zack maybe even being part of restoring Cloud's identity and making him whole, essentially making him better so he could potentially save an Aerith maybe in a different world. Because the Aerith and Cloud, as far as we know from that world that Zack was in, are still technically comatose. Cloud's in the chair and Aerith is on the bed. So maybe those two will come into play at some point in time. I don't know. Smarter people can figure this stuff out than me. Now we get to the theories. What's happening at the end of Rebirth? Is it Jenova Aerith? Is it a real Aerith? Is it a ghost Aerith? For the longest time, I was firmly planted in the realm of the ending being the Jenova manipulation theory, meaning the Aerith that we're sometimes seeing at the end of the game is in fact a Jenova manipulation created by Sephiroth and Jenova to mess with Cloud and break him even further. I still think part of that is happening. However, based on a lot of comments you guys have shared with me, I'm now seeing the other side of the theory spectrum, which is talking about no, the Aerith we're seeing at the end is in fact the real Aerith. And the thing that's crazy is that there's evidence to support both of these theories. So I find myself smack dab in the middle of both of them because I like both of them, and I do think that they're actually both playing out at the same time. So starting off first with that newer theory that I just came across. Again, the previous video I did where we talked about like the Jenova manipulation thing, I made that back in January. Early January, didn't release it until late February. I have no idea when this video is going up, but in that time, I've learned new things and I've changed my mind. That's how life works. But the idea is, and let me try and get this proper, make sure I don't mess anything up, the Aerith that we're seeing at the end of the game is in fact a real Aerith. However, it's two different Aeriths. There's the Aerith that we see walking around, kind of checking on people, seeing what they're doing, even comforting Red 13, which would cause Red 13 to say Aerith's name because he can feel her presence. That, I think, might be the Aerith that died, the one we couldn't save. And the reason I think that is because when that Aerith is standing in front of the tiny Bronco and the engines go off, her clothing does not react to the force that the engines are pushing out. But if you look at the other characters, specifically Cait Sith's cape, it does move back. So she's not affected by any of that, which tells me that's probably Ghost Aerith or Force Ghost Aerith, the one we unfortunately couldn't save. She's come back to basically check on people in the aftermath of her death, which is really gnarly if you think about it. It makes the ending still dark and sad because she died, and now she's coming back to check on people to make sure that they're okay. It's very Aerith of her to do that, super sweet, but I think again, that is the Ghost Aerith that I'm going to refer to her as. Now, there's a second Aerith that shows up in that ending as well. And that potentially is the Aerith that did survive. Because when we see her standing outside of the tiny Bronco as the engines rev up and the plane takes off, her clothing reacts to the force of the tiny Bronco. You can see the flowers moving around her, her hair, her coat, her dress, all of it now suddenly starts to move, which signifies to me, yeah, that is a real Aerith who did survive. How did she survive? Well, when Cloud is in the Forgotten Capital and we see the sequence where he clearly deflects Sephiroth's blade, and then it cuts back to, oh no, Aerith has actually been stabbed, she's bleeding out. We then flash forward to all of the battle stuff that happens, and we see one shot of the party leaning over a dead Aerith, and then it transitions into just Cloud and Aerith, and he tells her to wake up, and she wakes up. She's also got some live streams surrounding her, which could be part of, you know, what's going on there. But that, again, says to me that is a real Aerith. Now, how is this all happening at the same time? I think it has to do with how and when Cloud entered the Forgotten Capital, because we see that wall of whispers that the party cannot break through until we see that big white portal show up, which Aerith created at the end of 7 Remake to allow the party to chase Sephiroth and then fight him. So as the party is struggling to keep this portal open, again, there's that great moment with Vincent where he comes in and he's holding it with just one hand like a badass, super cool. Cloud is the only person to go through that portal. And as we saw in 7 Remake, when they went through that portal, they technically ended up in a different world, a world which was much more fantastic fantastical. They could do Advent Children type stuff. Sephiroth is just straight up throwing buildings at everyone. It's insane. So what if as Cloud enters that portal, he's kind of in a way mentally entering a different world, which sounds kind of weird, I know. But he goes in and we're technically seeing different outcomes from different worlds playing out at the same time. One where Cloud fails to save Aerith and another where he does save her. Which then leads to, again, the end of the game where Cloud's out in the field with everyone and we see different Aeriths just kind of roaming around. The ghost Aerith comforting people and the real Aerith that is interacting with Cloud and potentially was interacting with the rest of the party. Now, how is Cloud able to see all of this stuff? Again, maybe when he entered that portal and because Cloud is so messed up, he's not seeing things right, but that somehow has given him the ability to either exist in two worlds at the same time, or I think this is the situation that's happening. Cloud is still physically existing within the world where Aerith died, but somehow the world where she survived is now overlaying on top of this world. So he's seeing elements of that world, i.e. the rift in the sky and the very much alive Aerith that is talking to him and trying to reassure him like, yeah, you guys go fight Sephiroth. I'm gonna go back to the capital. I gotta figure out this whole prayer thing. I don't know how to do it, but clearly it's super important, so I gotta figure it out. Otherwise, we're all doomed. Which again, could be why she's acting so jovial at the end of the game. Just kind of like, yeah, we'll see each other again, dude. Or it could also be a situation where this Aerith is clearly aware that Cloud is not well, and she knows what Sephiroth is trying to do to him. So she's trying her best to act as maybe like a security blanket to reassure Cloud, like, yeah, I'm totally fine, dude. Like, you go do your thing. Don't assume I died. Don't even think about me dying, because that will cause that dam in Cloud's brain to break and he will just lose it. So it's almost like she's just trying to keep Cloud kind of happy. Now, there's another interesting aspect to that theory, and I'm starting to believe it myself, but there are people out there that think that the other world that Aerith is currently existing in isn't just some other world, it's a dream world created by Cloud. Maybe somehow as he went through that portal, it gave him some sort of weird special ability, and there was a scenario where in his mind, he acted and he saved Aerith. And now that world exists within Cloud's brain. He's got a world where she's alive, she's back at the Forgotten Capital praying to stop Meteor while the rest of the party goes on their adventure. And while this is all happening, Cloud is seeing both aspects. He's in the real world, but he's also in his own head in that dream world, and he's seeing aspects of that show up right in front of him. Now, what makes this even crazier is that Tifa might potentially be able to see into that world that Cloud created. How? When she fell into the live stream. We know when you fall into the live stream, you get different abilities. Tifa might not even be aware of some of the abilities and knowledge that she has, but when the party runs to the altar, they see Cloud holding Aerith. Tifa sees two different images. The real world where Aerith is bloody and dying, and that secondary world that Cloud created where she's okay. And that's super interesting because that's gonna make the relationship between Cloud and Tifa even more strained, which is what Sephiroth wants. Now it's not just manipulating the two of them. He now has a way to ensure that Tifa not only second guesses Cloud, but herself, because up to this point in the journey, Cloud is vividly remembering Nibelheim. And Tifa knows, you weren't there, dude. What the heck is going on? How do you know all of this stuff? She's also seen Cloud act really weird and out of character, but now if she is potentially able to see into his world at certain times, and she's gonna see some of the things that he's seeing, she's gonna question herself, which is gonna make her feel like she is going crazy, which is nuts. I absolutely love it. It's so crazy. It adds so many layers to the characters and the relationships with one another, but the thought that Cloud, is able to create this other world where Aerith can exist is super cool, and that might actually be what's playing out. And we've talked in the past about Sephiroth needing Cloud's help. What if that's part of his deal? Like, hey, you have a world where Aerith survived. What if we had a world where everyone survived? No one had to die. Now you just help me defeat Jenova and we can make that a reality. So you're probably thinking, okay, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. I think that too. So where does the other part of that theory, the Jenova manipulation, the other end of that spectrum, where does that come into play and how does it work into this theory? Because again, I think both of these are playing out at the same time. So we cut to the battle with Cloud and Sephiroth in Rebirth where Aerith shows up. Again, this completely catches Sephiroth off guard, and I don't know which Aerith this is. This might be the Omni Aerith within the live stream who is showing up to kind of even the odds, and maybe she even now has abilities abilities like Sephiroth did, where she can maybe hop worlds, which we've seemingly seen her do, and she's almost kind of like the opposite of Sephiroth. And in this scenario, he's shook because she's walking through that portal and he's like, I underestimated you. He didn't take into account that another Aerith was going to find her way into whatever area they were in and help Cloud fight.
You're the biggest ass-kissing, backstabbing, butt-sucking bastard!
It completely catches him off guard, but the gears start turning in Sephiroth's head the moment Aerith shows up, and he realizes, I can use this to my advantage. And the manipulation starts immediately, literally like a few seconds into the fight. Sephiroth tells Cloud, what do you make of this, Cloud? Is any of it real, or is it all just a fever dream? Maybe I can do my best deep voice, Sephiroth. What do you make of this, Cloud? Is any of it real, or is it all just a fever dream, clown? But again, that's already showing Sephiroth's gears are turning. He's already starting to mess with Cloud, and he's trying to push it even further of like, yo, didn't she just die? Now she's here? Is any of this happening? And Cloud responds with, that shit won't work on me anymore. Little does Cloud know it will in fact work on him. So then the fight ends, Sephiroth is beaten, he flies away, but he realizes before he flies away, he looks at the two of them and he smiles. And then he takes off, and I think that's because he realizes Aerith is now back. Or a version of her is back. I can use this. So he and Jenova create that creepy, unsettling Jenova manipulation version of Aerith, who I think we see in the Forgotten Capital. And again, this is all subjective, but when I watch that scene, it is so creepy. Aerith's just sitting there, half her face is shrouded in darkness, the music is very unsettling, the way she just interacts with Cloud feels kind of fake, very forced, like none of this is really genuine, which I think is going to lead into part 3. There are going to be scenarios where Cloud is interacting with different versions of Aerith and he doesn't know who is who. He could be talking to the ghost Aerith, he could be talking to the Aerith from the other world that survived who's now popped in to check on him, or he could be talking to that Jenova clone, which again would confuse the crap out of him, make him seem even crazier, and not allow the party to properly trust him, and when his brain does break, it's gonna make it 1,000 times worse. And we know that Sephiroth is the kind of character that would torture Cloud every chance he gets. He's obsessed with the guy. And by creating this version of Aerith, it could confuse Cloud even further. He could be feeding Cloud, Sephiroth could, or Jenova, they could be feeding Cloud bad information, stuff that makes things go wrong. We don't know. But at the end of the day, seeing both of these theories, I'm now kind of planted in the middle because I really do think that they're both happening at the same time. And the way that that ending plays out, again, it could be switching back and forth between the main world that we're in and the world where Aerith survived. It's literally just cutting back and forth. Or again, it's kind of through Cloud's perspective, he's in that main world where she's dead, but those elements of the other world are laid out on top of it like an overlay. So I think that's what's happening. I think both of those theories are playing out. But again, what makes this so exciting, we don't know what they're doing. It could be one or the other with this theory that plays out. It could be both of them. It could be something none of us have ever even discussed before that pops up in part 3 that makes us all go, whoa, I didn't see that in Remake and Rebirth. This is insane. And again, they got to stick the landing. I have faith that they will do so because, again, I really have enjoyed the story stuff in Remake and Rebirth, and I think that what they have planned for Part 3 will finally, hopefully, bring everything together. So I'm crossing my fingers that they do stick the landing, and I think they will. But for those of you who are tossing out those other theories of how, yeah, this is a real Aerith, thank you. You have opened my eyes, my special eyes that could not be opened before because they were clouded by stubbornness. They are now open, and I think this is a really cool idea, and I do, again, like the idea of both of these theories playing out at the same time. With that being said, that is the video. Let me know in the comments down below, what do you guys think of anything we discussed in today's community comments video, whether it's Vincent and how he's gonna play out, how do you think they're gonna open up part 3, and what are your thoughts on these theories of the Jenova manipulation stuff, but also this being a real Aerith that is interacting with Cloud, albeit a dead Aerith and a real Aerith from a different world. I'm Curious Corduroy. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.